Dr. Han Gil Kim stared at the microscope screen in his Seoul laboratory, rubbing his tired eyes. Something was wrong with the blood samples, but he couldn't figure out what. After 15 years as a biochemist, he had never seen anything like this. "Dr. Park, could you look at this?" he called to his colleague. Dr. Ji-min Park walked over, her lab coat swishing as she moved. She was the best genetic researcher in South Korea, and if anyone could help him understand this, it would be her. "The DNA structure, it's changing," she said, leaning closer to the screen. "But that's impossible." Han Gil pointed to several markers on the display. "Look at these patterns. They're not random mutations. Something is changing human DNA on purpose." As they discussed the strange findings, the laboratory lights flickered. At first, they thought it was just another power problem. Then the whole building shook. "Earthquake?" Ji-min asked, grabbing the edge of the table. Han Gil shook his head and walked to the window. Other people were doing the same thing in the buildings across the street. Everyone was looking up at the sky. "Ji-min," he said quietly, "you need to see this." She joined him at the window. Above the Seoul skyline, massive ships hung in the air. They were dark gray and shaped like giant arrowheads. The smallest one was bigger than 3 football fields. Their phones started buzzing at the same time. Emergency alerts lit up the screens. "Unknown aircraft over major cities. Stay calm. Stay indoors." "Look at these readings," Ji-min said, pointing at their lab equipment. All their instruments were going crazy. The radiation levels were rising, but it wasn't dangerous radiation. It was something else. The lab's TV turned on by itself. Every screen in the building did the same thing. A face appeared. At least, they thought it was a face. It had 4 eyes and gray skin that looked like metal. "People of Earth," the creature said in perfect Korean. They would later learn everyone heard it in their own language. "We are the Vestra. We have watched your world for a very long time." Han Gil felt cold as he watched. Something about the way the alien spoke reminded him of a farmer talking about livestock. "Your species has been part of our greatest project," the Vestra continued. "For 500 years, we have slowly changed your genetic code. We have made you perfect." Ji-min grabbed Han Gil's arm. "The DNA changes we found." "Perfect for what?" Han Gil whispered, but he was starting to understand. His grandfather used to have a farm. He remembered how they would feed the animals special food to make their meat taste better. The Vestra's 4 eyes seemed to stare directly at them through the screen. "You have been made perfect for consumption. Your flesh has been enhanced for our pleasure. The harvest will begin soon." The screen went black. For a moment, there was total silence in the lab. Then they heard the screaming start outside. "The samples," Han Gil said suddenly, running back to the microscope. "Ji-min, help me save everything. All our research, all the data." "Why?" she asked, even as she started helping him. "What good will it do? Those DNA changes we found, they're not working right. The patterns are breaking down. Some humans are becoming resistant." He looked at her with fierce determination. "If we're going to survive this, the answer is in our own blood." As they rushed to save their research, the ships above Seoul opened their huge doors. The harvest was beginning, but humanity wasn't going down without a fight. And in a small laboratory in Seoul, 2 scientists had already found the first weakness in the aliens' perfect plan. Outside the lab windows, chaos spread through the streets of Seoul. But inside, Han Gil and Ji-min worked faster than they ever had before. They didn't know it yet, but their discovery would change everything. The Vestra thought humans were just food, but they were about to learn a hard lesson. Never underestimate your prey. The first attack came at dawn. The Vestra ships released thousands of small pods over Seoul. Each pod opened to reveal floating metal spheres that moved through the city like hungry insects. Dr. Han Gil Kim watched from his laboratory window as the spheres chased people through the streets. When a sphere caught someone, it surrounded them in bright light, and then both the person and the sphere disappeared. "They're taking them to the ships," Dr. Ji-min Park said, her voice shaking. She had been working without sleep for 24 hours, studying their research data. "But look at this, Han-gil. Some people aren't being taken." On their screens, they could see security camera feeds from around the city. Ji-min was right. The metal spheres passed by some people as if they couldn't see them. "It's the genetic resistance," Han-gil said, excitement in his voice despite the horror outside. "These people must have the DNA mutation we found. Their bodies are fighting against the Vestra's modifications." A loud crash made them jump. The laboratory door burst open. A young woman ran in, followed by one of the metal spheres. Without thinking, Han-gil grabbed a fire extinguisher and sprayed it at the sphere. To everyone's surprise, the cold spray made the sphere malfunction and crash to the floor. "Thank you," the woman said, catching her breath. "I'm Soo-jin Cho. I was trying to reach this building because I picked up strange signals coming from here." She pulled out a tablet computer covered in modified circuits. "I'm a computer scientist. I've been tracking their communication patterns." More explosions rocked the building. The Vestra were getting impatient with their harvest. Through the windows, they could see larger ships descending toward the city. "We need to get to the underground research facility," Ji-min said. "It's radiation shielded. Maybe it will block their sensors too." They grabbed all the research data and samples they could carry. Soo-jin downloaded copies of her communication data. As they headed for the basement, they found more survivors hiding in the building. Each person they met showed the same pattern. They had all been passed over by the harvesting spheres. In the underground lab, Han-gil set up their equipment while Ji-min took blood samples from everyone. Soo-jin worked on hacking into the alien communication network. "Look at this," Ji-min called out after an hour. "Every person here has the same genetic marker. It's a natural mutation that appeared in response to the Vestra's modifications. Our bodies have been fighting back without us knowing it." Soo-jin looked up from her computer. "I've decoded some of their messages. The Vestra are confused. Their harvest is collecting fewer humans than they expected. And," she paused, reading more, "some of the humans they've taken are making them sick." Han-gil looked at the blood samples under his microscope. "It's not just resistance," he said slowly. "Our bodies have developed something new, something toxic to them." He turned to the others, his eyes bright with hope. "They thought they were changing us to be better food, but they actually forced us to evolve a defense mechanism." Above them, Seoul burned as the Vestra continued their harvest. But in that underground laboratory, humanity had found its first real hope. The aliens had spent centuries modifying humans to be the perfect prey, but they had overlooked something important. Living things adapt to survive, and humans were very good at surviving. "We need to find others like us," Ji-min said, looking at the small group of survivors. "And we need to understand exactly what makes us toxic to them." "I can help with that," a voice said from the doorway. A man in a torn military uniform stepped into the lab. "I'm Captain Young-ho Lee, and I know where we can find more survivors." The war for Earth's survival was just beginning. But in that basement lab, surrounded by people the aliens couldn't take, the first pieces of humanity's counterattack were falling into place. Captain Young-ho Lee knew Seoul better than anyone. He had spent 15 years studying the city's underground tunnels and bunkers. Now those tunnels were saving lives. "This way," he said, leading the group through a dark passage. Dr. Han-gil Kim, Dr. Ji-min Park, and Soo-jin Cho followed him, carrying their precious research equipment. Behind them came 30 other survivors, all people the Vestra couldn't harvest. They reached a large underground room that used to be a subway maintenance area. Young-ho had turned it into a command center. Radio equipment lined the walls, and computer screens showed views of the city above. "We have similar bases across Seoul," Young-ho explained. "Every person here is like you, immune to the alien harvesting technology." Ji-min set up her mobile lab equipment right away. "We need to test everyone," she said. Each blood sample helps us understand our immunity better. Su-Jin found a corner with good wireless signals. She connected her computers to study the Vestra's communications. Their ships use some kind of quantum network, she said. It's advanced, but not impossible to hack. Han Gil worked with Jimin, examining blood samples. The mutation is spreading, he said, looking through his microscope. It's like our DNA knows it's under attack and is teaching itself to fight back. Young-ho gathered everyone to share what they knew. The Vestra have taken nearly 40% of Seoul's population, he said, but their harvest is slowing down. They're having trouble finding people they can take. That's not all, Su-Jin added, looking up from her screens. I've intercepted their medical reports. The Vestra who ate humans from the first harvest are getting sick. Some have already died. A loud rumble shook dust from the ceiling. Everyone looked up nervously. They're getting frustrated, Young-ho said. They're using bigger weapons to flush people out of hiding. But they don't know about these old tunnels. Jae-min called Han-gil over to her workstation. Look at this, she said, pointing to her microscope screen. The bacteria in our digestive system. It's changed. It's producing a compound I've never seen before. Han-gil studied the readings. This must be what's making them sick, he said. Our gut bacteria has evolved to produce a poison that only affects the Vestra. Can we use this? Young-ho asked. Turn it into a weapon? Maybe, Han-gil said, but we need better equipment, and we need to find a way to concentrate the compound. Su-Jin raised her hand. I think I can help with that. The Vestra have food processing centers in their ships. If I can hack their systems, we might be able to deliver the poison right to their food supply. Another explosion rocked the bunker. Through the security cameras, they watched a group of Vestra soldiers march through the streets. The aliens were tall and moved like predators, their metal gray skin gleaming in the sunlight. They think they're the hunters, Young-ho said, watching the screens. But they've never faced prey that could fight back. Not like this. In the following days, more survivors found their way to the bunker. Each person brought new skills and new hope. Engineers helped build better equipment. Doctors worked with Jimin to understand the mutation. Computer experts joined Su-Jin in breaking the alien codes. Underground, hidden from the Vestra's hungry eyes, humanity was preparing its counterattack. The aliens had spent centuries planning their feast, but they never expected their food to evolve, to adapt, to fight back. And in that underground base, surrounded by the best minds of Seoul, a plan was taking shape. The hunters would soon learn what it meant to become the hunted. 3 weeks had passed since the Vestra's first attack. In the underground laboratory beneath Seoul, Dr. Han-gil Kim looked at his latest test results with growing excitement. His hand shook as he called Dr. Jimin Park over to his workstation. We've finally isolated it, he said, pointing to his screen. The compound that makes us toxic to the Vestra. It's beautiful in its simplicity. Jae-min studied the molecular structure displayed on the screen. After countless hours of research, they had found the key to humanity's survival. The human digestive system had evolved to produce a simple protein that was harmless to humans, but deadly to the Vestra. Su-Jin Cho, who had been monitoring alien communications, rolled her chair over to them. The timing couldn't be bettered, she said. The Vestra are planning a feast in 3 days. They're gathering all their harvested humans in their main processing center. Captain Young-ho Lee stood up from his tactical station. How many have they taken? He asked. Nearly 2 million people from Seoul alone, Su-Jin replied. But they haven't eaten most of them yet. They're waiting for their leadership to arrive for the feast. Han-gil walked to the center of the room, where a large table displayed a map of Seoul. We can save those people, he said. The Vestra have been storing them in stasis pods. If we can deliver our weapon before the feast, we might be able to free them. Jae-min began explaining their discovery to the room full of resistance fighters. The protein our bodies produce is like a key that unlocks the Vestra's cellular structure. It causes their cells to break down slowly. That's why they didn't notice it at first. But we've concentrated it, Han-Gil added. In its pure form, it works much faster. One dose could incapacitate a Vestra in minutes. Young-Ho studied the map. Getting into their processing center won't be easy. They guard their food supply carefully. They might guard the doors, Su-Jin said with a smile, but they don't guard their network very well. I found a way into their environmental control systems. We can deliver the protein through their air filtration. The room grew quiet as everyone realized what this meant. They had a weapon. They had a delivery system. And most importantly, they had a chance to strike back. Han-Gil looked at their stored samples of the concentrated protein. They had enough to fill several containers. How soon can we be ready? He asked. I need 6 hours to finish programming their systems, Su-Jin said. After that, we can trigger the release at any time. Young-Ho nodded. We'll need diversions, teams to draw their attention away from the processing center. And we need to be ready to help the prisoners once they're released. Jae-min started preparing the protein samples for transport. This has to work, she said quietly. We might not get another chance. As the resistance fighters began their preparations, Han-Gil watched them work. These people, who had survived because their bodies had evolved to resist the Vestra, were about to change the course of the war. The aliens had chosen humans as their prey because they thought they could control human evolution. Instead, they had created their own destruction. In 3 days, the Vestra would gather for their great feast. But humanity was preparing a surprise course that would make them regret ever seeing Earth as their dining table. The scientific breakthrough was complete. Now it was time for war. The resistance team gathered in the underground bunker for their final preparation. Captain Young-Ho Lee stood before a detailed hologram of the Vestra Processing Center, outlining their plan one last time. The facility has 4 main entrances, he explained, pointing to the glowing markers. Our diversion teams will attack these 3 points, drawing their guards away from the eastern entrance. That's where we'll deliver our weapon. Dr. Han-Gil Kim and Dr. Jae-min Park carefully packed the concentrated protein into special containers. They had worked through 5 sleepless nights to produce enough of the toxin. Each container held enough to affect an entire section of the alien facility. Remember, Jae-min said to the handling team, these containers must stay cold. If they warm up too much, the protein will break down. Su-Jin Cho sat surrounded by screens, her fingers moving rapidly across multiple keyboards. I've programmed their environmental systems to malfunction at exactly the right time. When the alarms go off, they'll send all their maintenance crews to the wrong locations. Young-Ho checked his watch. The Vestra leadership arrives in 6 hours. Their feast begins in 8. We move in 5. Han-Gil watched the resistance fighters prepare their weapons and equipment. These weren't soldiers. They were office workers, students, and ordinary citizens who had found the courage to fight back. The Vestra had made a terrible mistake in underestimating human determination. Su-Jin, Jae-min called out suddenly, "Can you show us the latest images from inside the processing center?" The main screen lit up with surveillance footage. Thousands of humans floated in stasis pods, waiting to be processed into Vestra food. Among them, Han-Gil spotted familiar faces, colleagues from his laboratory, neighbors from his apartment building. "We're going to save them," Young-Ho said firmly, seeing the pain in Han-Gil's eyes. "All of them." The hours passed quickly as they made their final preparations. Su-Jin installed a virus in the Vestra's communication network, ready to blind their sensors at the critical moment. Jae-min triple-checked each container of the protein weapon. Han-Gil prepared the antidote that would safely wake people from stasis. At last, Young-Ho gave the signal. Teams 1 through 3, move out. Begin your attacks in exactly 45 minutes. The diversion teams departed through different tunnel exits. They carried traditional weapons, but their main goal was to create chaos and confusion. The real attack would come from within the Vestra's own systems. "Delivery team, you're up," Young-Ho said. "Su-Jin, start the hack." Sujin's fingers flew across her keyboard. Environmental control systems accessed. Setting up the cascade failure now. Han-Gil and Ji-Min carefully loaded the protein containers onto small wheeled robots that Sujin could control remotely. These machines would carry their weapon through the maintenance tunnels and into the facility's air handling system. Remember, Han-Gil said to everyone remaining in the bunker, once we release the protein, we have exactly 20 minutes to enter the facility and start evacuating people. The Vestra will be incapacitated, but they won't die immediately. Young-Ho checked the time one final time. Everything we've worked for comes down to the next 2 hours. The Vestra thought they were staging a feast. Instead, they're about to learn that humans are not just food. We're the most dangerous prey they've ever encountered. Above them, the first explosions marked the beginning of the diversion attacks. Operation Turning Tables had begun. The Vestra Processing Center stood like a massive silver tower against Seoul's evening sky. Inside, alien leaders gathered for their grand feast, unaware of the danger approaching through their own ventilation systems. In the Resistance Command Center, Sujin Cho watched her screens intently. Diversion teams are in position, she reported. The Vestra are responding exactly as we predicted. Captain Young-Ho Lee nodded. Begin Phase 2. Sujin's fingers moved across her keyboard, directing their remote-controlled robots through the maintenance tunnels. Each robot carried containers of the concentrated protein weapon that Dr. Han-Gil Kim and Dr. Ji-Min Park had created. First robot has reached the primary air handling unit, Sujin announced. Second and third robots approaching backup systems. Above ground, the diversion teams launched their attacks. Explosions and gunfire drew Vestra guards away from the critical areas. The aliens responded with overwhelming force, not realizing these attacks were merely a distraction. Now, Young-Ho ordered. Sujin activated their weapon. The robots released the protein concentrate into the ventilation system. Through the security cameras they had hacked, they watched as the invisible weapon spread through the facility. The effect was dramatic. The first Vestra began to stumble within minutes. Their metal-like skin turned dull, and they struggled to remain standing. In the main feasting hall, alien leaders collapsed mid-speech. "It's working," Ji-Min whispered, watching the screens. "The concentrated protein is affecting them even faster than we expected." Young-Ho grabbed his gear. "Rescue teams, move in. We have 20 minutes before the Vestra recover enough to fight back." Han-Gil led the medical team into the facility. They carried the stasis revival drug he had developed. Behind them came hundreds of resistance fighters, ready to help evacuate the prisoners. The scene inside the processing center was chaos. Vestra soldiers lay incapacitated throughout the corridors. Those still conscious were too weak to stop the humans flooding into their facility. "Begin revival procedures," Han-Gil ordered as they reached the stasis chamber. Rows upon rows of pods held sleeping humans, saved from becoming alien food. Ji-Min moved quickly from pod to pod, administering the revival drug. People began waking up, confused but alive. Resistance fighters helped them to their feet and guided them toward the exits. In the command center, Sujin monitored the situation. "Vestra reinforcement ships approaching," she warned. "We have 15 minutes left." The rescue teams worked faster. They had freed nearly 1,000 people, but thousands more remained in stasis. Young-Ho organized the rescued humans into groups, leading them through safe routes back to the underground bunkers. "Wait," Han-Gil called out suddenly. He was examining a fallen Vestra leader. "Their biology. The protein isn't just incapacitating them. It's changing their genetic structure. They won't be able to digest human flesh ever again." Ji-Min checked his readings. "He's right. We haven't just defeated them today. We've made it impossible for them to ever use humans as food again." A massive explosion rocked the building. The Vestra reinforcements had arrived. But they were too late. Most of their leadership lay helpless, and thousands of their intended meals were escaping. "Fall back," Young-Ho ordered. "We've done what we came to do." As the resistance fighters retreated with the rescued prisoners, they left behind something more than just fallen enemies. They had left proof that humanity would not be prey. The Vestra had spent centuries preparing their feast, but in one night, humanity had turned their banquet into a defeat they would never forget. The first major victory against the Vestra belonged to humanity. The hunters had become the hunted, and the war was only beginning. The news of Seoul's victory spread across the world through hidden communication networks. Dr. Han-Gil Kim found himself speaking to scientists from every continent, sharing his research on the protein weapon that had proved so effective against the Vestra. The compound is simple to produce, he explained during a secure video conference with laboratories worldwide. Most hospitals and research centers already have the equipment needed. Dr. Ji-Min Park worked with international medical teams to improve the formula. Every human carries this protein now, she told them. We just need to concentrate it and make it stronger. In their underground command center, Soo-Jin Cho had made an even more important discovery. The Vestra ships all used the same computer network, she explained to military leaders from different countries. Once we break into one ship, we can access them all. Captain Yum-Ho Lee's successful rescue operation became a model for resistance groups worldwide. He trained teams from other cities through secure video links, teaching them how to fight the aliens who had tried to eat humanity. The Vestra were facing attacks everywhere. In New York, scientists released the protein weapon into a harvesting ship's air system. In Moscow, resistance fighters freed thousands of captured humans from stasis pods. In Rio de Janeiro, hackers used Soo-Jin's programs to shut down alien defense systems. They're retreating from multiple cities, Soo-Jin announced one morning, watching her global tracking screens. Their ships are pulling back to high orbit. The Vestra tried to adapt, but their biology worked against them. The protein weapon had changed them permanently. Even those who survived could no longer process human flesh. Their carefully planned feast had become poisonous to them. Han-Gil studied new data from around the world. Their genetic structure is breaking down faster than we expected, he said. They can't even touch humans now without getting sick. Young-Ho gathered everyone in the command center to share the latest military intelligence. The Vestra are abandoning their ground operations, he said. They're focusing on hit-and-run attacks, trying to salvage what they can. But humanity was ready for these desperate tactics. Soo-Jin had taught resistance groups how to track Vestra ships. Ji-Min had helped develop early warning systems that could detect their approach. Young-Ho's defensive strategies were protecting cities worldwide. The aliens who had seen Earth as their dining table were now fighting for survival. Their mighty fleet, once meant to transport their harvest, was becoming a collection of escape vessels. We're not just driving them away, Ji-Min said, looking at their latest test results. We're changing the future. No predator species will be able to eat humans again. We've evolved beyond being prey. In cities around the world, people emerged from hiding. The Vestra ships that still loomed in the sky no longer brought terror. Instead, they were reminders of humanity's strength, of how people from every nation had united against a common enemy. Soo-Jin's global communication network shared victories and strategies. Scientists collaborated across borders to improve their weapons. Soldiers and civilians worked together to protect their communities. The Vestra had wanted to divide humanity into portions for their feast. Instead, they had united Earth like never before. The final battle for Earth was approaching. But now, humanity was ready. They were no longer scattered prey waiting to be harvested. They had become hunters themselves, and the Vestra were about to face the full force of human determination. The final battle began at dawn. The remaining Vestra ships gathered above Earth for one last desperate attack. Their fleet, once numbering thousands of vessels, had been reduced to barely 100. In the Seoul Command Center, Soo-Jin Cho monitored the global defense network she had helped create. All cities are reporting ready, she announced. Our systems are linked worldwide. Dr. Han-Gil Kim and Dr. Ji-Min Park stood by their latest weapon, an improved version of the protein that had first turned the tide. This new formula could spread through the air faster and affect the Vestra more quickly. Launch the defense satellites, Captain Yum-Ho Lee ordered. Around the Earth, hundreds of small satellites activated. These weren't weapons. They were delivery systems designed to release clouds of the concentrated protein into the upper atmosphere. Any Vestra ship that entered the clouds would be immediately contaminated. The Vestra attacked with everything they had left. Their ships dove toward major cities, trying to break through Earth's defenses. But humanity was ready. "They're entering the protein clouds now," Su-Jin reported, watching her screens. The effect was immediate. Vestra ships began losing power. Their crews, already weakened by earlier exposure to the protein, could no longer control their vessels. Some ships crashed into the ocean. Others drifted helplessly in orbit. A few managed to turn around and flee into space. Through it all, Earth's defenders held firm, protecting their cities and people. In the command center, a message appeared on all screens. It was from the Vestra leadership, broadcasting on all frequencies. "People of Earth," the message began, "we acknowledge our defeat. Our species can no longer survive on human flesh. We will leave your world and never return." But the Vestra had one final message, a warning to the galaxy. Su-Jin translated it as it was sent. "Let all predator species know, humans are not prey. They are apex predators who have evolved beyond our ability to hunt. Earth is now marked as a death world. To hunt, there is to court extinction." As the last Vestra ships disappeared into deep space, celebrations broke out worldwide. In Seoul, Han-gil and Ji-min hugged each other, their years of research finally bearing fruit. Su-Jin wiped tears from her eyes as she shut down the emergency networks. Young-ho allowed himself a small smile. The world began to rebuild. The underground resistance bases became research centers, studying the changes humans had undergone. The protein that had saved humanity had become a permanent part of human biology. Future generations would be born naturally immune to any predator species. 1 month after the final battle, the team gathered in their old laboratory, now restored. They had been called there to receive awards, but none of them cared much about medals. "What will you do now?" Yum-Ho asked the others. "Keep researching," Han-gil said. "We need to understand how we evolved so quickly." "Build better defense systems," Su-Jin added. "Other aliens might come, even if they don't want to eat us." "Prepare," Jae-min said simply. "Humanity isn't just part of the galactic community now. We're one of its most dangerous species." They looked out the window at the rebuilt Seoul skyline. The sky was clear of alien ships, and people walked the streets without fear. Earth had faced its greatest threat and emerged stronger. The Vestra had wanted a feast. Instead, they had created their own worst nightmare, a species that could fight back. Humanity had proven itself not just worthy of survival, but capable of becoming something more. They were no longer prey. They were the hunters now. And somewhere in deep space, the Vestra carried a message to the galaxy. Never underestimate humans. They bite back.